Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time to join us for this little bit of Aramaic on the weekend. And we're continuing with our um, examination of the Beatitudes as found in Matthew chapter 5. And we're on verse 9 today, which is a beautiful one. Blessed are the peacemakers from the King James Version, for they shall be called the children of God. Most of us have that memorized. Looking at Etheridge translation here, it's blessed are the makers of peace, for the children of God. The Syriac Aramaic would be Alaha or Aloha. They shall be called. And so we're going to take a look at a couple key words here. Makers of peace or peacemakers, as it's translated, I think has some interest to it. And then, being called the children of God. So take a look and reading the Aramaic, so you get a chance to hear how that sounds. Tu Vaihun, which is the Ashrei or blessed are they, and then le avdai, which would be the word we're going to look at, makers of peace, and then it's shalama, which is the word very much like shalom. You may reference that or know that being the word for peace, and then dav nav, and then da laha, which is the word for God, and then net karun, which is the word for they shall be called. So we're going to unpack this, analyze that in the Dukrana, which gives us just a beautiful way of, easy way of taking a look here. Expand this window. You see the four translations here, pretty much all the same. I like Murdoch, the cultivators of peace. I think that's very nice. Blessed are peacemakers. So as we look at this word that is giving a description of how is peace created. The word peace itself is a very beautiful word in the Hebrew and Aramaic. It really gives an understanding of completeness, um, because when things are complete, when things are um, filled with everything that they're intended to be, then peace will be the result. And so that we'll take a look at that a little bit closer as we dig into that. But the question is, how is peace achieved? And so this word of da, which is from the word that actually is to make or to do, but in Hebrew, it's actually the word for someone who is under servitude, even under slavery, and it has to do with what is being created. So what's interesting here is this is a word of action. It's a word of something that's occurring. Now, the idea of finding peace and creating peace is something that needs to be worked at. And of course, as we look through the history, peace has always been very elusive. And even in religiosity, in Christianity, in Judaism, peace has been somewhat elusive. Um, I know that in our realm today, especially when it comes into religious circles, um, we don't understand how to really um, strive for peace. The idea of working towards peace really means that compromise has to be achieved, that two people who are trying to obtain peace between them, assuming they have different viewpoints, which is what causes the strife, have to come together and talk through their viewpoints and each have to compromise, each have to give. Well, that's a very challenging subject and very challenging, especially when it comes to religious systems, because you have your beliefs, you have what you feel is right, and by doing that, the natural assumption is that other people who don't share your same belief, how do you look at them without thinking less of them or feeling that they're less, or how do you interact with them without coming across as having a feeling of superiority or in the base terms of, I'm right and you're wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right. And um, we see a lot of that going on. And that's where this verse just speaks to me, because how do we get past that? How do we get to the point where we can truly value people for their opinions, if they're different than ours or when they're different than ours, and come to a place where we can make peace? And that's not something that's talked about very much in religious circles. And here, looking at this word of being an action of something that's performed, something that you make, it is in a active participle, which means it's has an ing normally to it. We could think of it that way in English. So it's something that's continually being worked on. It's a progress. Now, when I had to think of the setting in which Jesus is speaking, he's speaking either Aramaic or Hebrew, and he's speaking something to just his disciples. Others think there are others there on the hillside, but they are Jewish people. They are people who have studied the Hebrew scriptures, gone to the synagogue and temple services, and so they have that background. What did they hear when they are confronted with making peace? It made me think of the religious entities that existed at that time. We know about the Sadducees, we know about the Pharisees, we know that there was a group called the Essenes, we know that there were some called the Zealots, but yet we know that the Sadducees and Pharisees went to the same synagogue, went to the same temple, and were able to exist side by side. Even though they had very different opinions, they still worshiped together. And this is where my thought process went when it comes to this term of peacemakers. How were they able to, I guess, to put it in a just a common vernacular, how were they able to play nicely in the sandbox together? How were they able to worship and be together unless they found a way to achieve peace? So, with that thought, I went and looked up on Rabbi Google here and said, well, how many Jewish denominations are there? What did peace really give them? And so it says there's no real number, but there are three most prominent: the Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. Then there's Hasidic, Reconstructionist. There's the Satmar group in New York. But you don't have too many. So um, let's, for fun, take out the word Jewish and put the word Christian in. And how many Christian denominations are there? I did this and I was floored. Do you see the number that I'm looking at? Over 45,000 Christian denominations worldwide. Obviously, it can be broken into some of the larger main groups, but 45,000, really? Um, Something just goes through my mind saying Jesus's prayer of, Lord, let them all be one as you and I are one. Something got missed here. And so going back to these verses made me think of the difference, or in Judaism, in Christianity, what's their driving force, and what's going on here. Um, Knowing that in Judaism, one of the things that obviously caused them to be a religious entity is the giving of the Torah. When they came to Mount Sinai and the Torah was given to them, that is truly when Jewishness and Judaism began. And every year they celebrate the Exodus out of Egypt and the receiving of the Torah. The Torah historically is somewhat aligned with the festival of Shavuot, festival of first fruits, or as we know it today, the day of Pentecost. And every year they go back to that point and they thank God for being delivered, thank God for receiving the Torah. And that has align them. That is their core of what has kept them. Now, when Christianity came on the scene, obviously Christianity's birth parallels that very deeply, because on the day of Pentecost is when the Holy Spirit came down and they were filled with the Holy Spirit, and the and the Christian church began. But that was a unifying factor for them. You read through the book of Acts, you read through the epistles, all have reference to going back to that root of receiving the Spirit of God. And but the problem is as time went on, Christianity did not continue to go back to that root. Hellenization or integration with the Greek culture and the Roman culture caused them to veer away from that history, veer away from that of going back to your roots. And the historians say that that is really when all these fragmentations of Christianity came into play, when they started adopting the Greek culture, adopting the Greek language, which took them out of the Hebrew Aramaic study, and they started looking at things through more of a philosophical lens, through the idea of looking at every word and judging whether they were following words and following creeds rather than, as one commentator says, rather than following relationship, where the Jewish people would go back to Mount Sinai, look at the relationship that was established between God and the Israelites, and that was their core principle. Christianity stopped going back to the day of Pentecost, stopped looking at the relationship, and began to formulate creeds. And if you didn't follow the creed to the letter, you were looked at negatively. And obviously, it led to 45,000 different Christian denominations because of how these creeds or lack of creeds were interpreted. And all of that just leaves me feeling really kind of sad here because it was not what Jesus had been teaching. And it goes back to this verse here of blessed are those that strive, those that seek to make peace. And that is really what gives us the ability to be called the children of God, or to have that identifying factor that when people would look at us, they would see the attributes of God. And I find that just very motivating to me to have something to work for. Looking at the Matthew Harley text of the Hebrew, it has the different wording. It uses a different word of shalemim, which is a, referencing to the peace offerings that were given in the temple, which I found very, very fascinating. And that they were truly invested in obtaining peace if it took, no matter what the cost, no matter what the cost. And it's in a PL form, which means it's very intensive. And the goal is to have the same characteristics of the one who's ruling over you, because Elohim, Allah can mean a ruler, as also can mean God, but it means the one who's effectively ruling your life, that you are exhibiting all those same functions, promote civility for the good of mankind. To effective rulers would keep a peaceful society, which are all God-given traits. It's what he has put the rulers in place for. And so with that, I'm challenged to look at how I can interact with those who may think differently, have different cultures, different backgrounds, different religious beliefs than I, and how can we truly follow Jesus's directive here to be makers of peace, but yet retain what we feel is our calling, retain what we feel God has led us to in our relationship with Him, and keep going back to that place that's supposed to unify us, the place where Christianity began, where the Spirit was poured out, and to reach back and to remember that and to use that as a rallying point to take us back to a place where we can try to fulfill this an admonition of Jesus to be a maker of peace. So God bless you all. Thanks for listening today, and may you have a peaceful rest of your day.